Hello everybody and welcome to parksbros. It's Drew here, and today for Listmas 2023, we're going to be counting down my top 10 night rides on roller coasters. That's right, on the second day of Listmas, I'm giving to you my top 10 night rides on roller coasters because man, oh man, if there is something that you have to experience, it's the difference between night and day on plenty of these rides. Now, I will mention there are quite a few rides I have not been able to experience in both night and day, and I'm sure if I was able to experience them at night, I would have them in these rankings, including something like Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City or Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. But I'm specifically going to be focusing on the differences between night and day rides because man, oh man, there can be an insane difference between the two. And with some of these rides, you'll see exactly why. So let's turn out those lights and get counting down. At number 10 is going to be at my local Six Flags park, Six Flags Magic Mountain, for the most unhinged and insane coaster in North America for X2. Now, don't get me wrong, this ride is insane in the daytime as well. However, with you in those rotating seats facing straight towards the ground, with the fire effects, with the music, everything just gets more intense at night. Why is that? Well, there's minimal lighting in that area, so you pretty much see darkness and not much else. Well, of course, if the flame is working, you'll see the flame as it's right next to you. But it just brings the insanity of this ride up to a new level. And if there is one night ride you're going to get at Six Flags Magic Mountain, I would highly recommend it either be X2 or maybe Tatsu, especially if it's Holiday in the Park or Fright Fest, because with Tatsu you get to see some of the cool lighting. However, in terms of ride quality going up, I think X2 has a bigger jump. Speaking of pretty big jumps, let's jump all the way to Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio for their record-breaking RMC roller coaster, Steel Vengeance. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of great night rides at Cedar Point. However, I will say the most noticeable of which is gonna have to be Steel Vengeance, at least in my experience. This ride boasts more airtime than any other ride on the planet, meaning you're gonna be spending more time out of your seat than any other ride on the planet. It is consistently ranked the best ride, if not one of the best rides in the world, for that reason alone. However, something that I feel doesn't get mentioned enough is how great the night rides truly are on the ride, as there are spotlights underneath the crazy wooden support structure that add some crazy lighting changes that you wouldn't exactly expect. It can also add to the bugs in the area, so keep that in mind. It's a ride that I typically wear sunglasses on, even if it's midnight. But then again, wearing sunglasses at night makes those night rides even more memorable. Jumping all the way to Florida now for Islands of Adventure at the Universal Orlando Resort for Velocicoaster. This is a night ride experience that changes pretty drastically, especially because of the nighttime lighting in the first half of the ride. There's some very colorful lighting with some Velociraptor statuettes that you'll pass, and also that second half of the layout, because of its minimal lighting on top of the lagoon, just makes you feel like you're on a completely different ride, even more so than in the day. You go from this bright, colorful setting to almost complete darkness while going through that Mosasaurus roll. It is really an intimidating change that I adore so much. And if you had a best time to ride this ride, it would be at nighttime, the front right seat, at least for me. Speaking of that nighttime lighting though, let's head to Buena Park, California for Knott's Berry Farm Zone Hang Time, probably the most stunning coaster in terms of nighttime lighting out there. The wonderful people at KCL were able to create what was realistically a light show on a coaster. And there are literal light shows on this coaster if you're able to time it right throughout the specific seasons, where this lighting will match up with specific songs that are being played or just mimic the waves of the ocean. It's a really incredible experience, especially if you're up in the front row, because it really feels like you're just just riding on top of the light, as it's almost everything you can see outside of potentially the skyline of the surrounding area. It is a really wonderful night ride, and I highly recommend checking it out, though, especially, oh my goodness, if you can ride it on July 4th in the front row just like I did, it is unbelievable. Hopping straight back to Islands of Adventure, now we're going to check out Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, which is already a pretty variable ride in its own right, as half of the train is sitting on a motorcycle seat where the other half is in the sidecar. Now, add on a front headlight to each one of those motorcycles and some extra lighting all around the course itself. It really makes this ride feel a heck of a lot faster and intense. It's definitely one of my favorite night rides out there. It really immerses you better than in the day, at least in my opinion, and it's totally worth that 2-hour wait. Now let's head back to Ohio, except this time we're going to Mason for Kings Island and their incredible Giga Coaster Orion. This thing is pretty remarkable in the daytime, especially in the back row. However, at night, the front row is the place to be. Now, this is a really interesting ride, just like Velocicoaster at night. However, it's not one half is lit up and the other isn't. It's on and off throughout the entire layout. So there are parts of this ride where all you can see is the LEDs pointed directly at you. But because of that, your eyes try to adjust to that, and then it immediately gets taken away and you're in pure darkness. Because of that, it becomes kind of disorienting in the best way. You're going 90 plus miles an hour, but don't exactly know what's next. And it really adds to the intensity of this ride, and man oh man, especially if you're in the front row with the wind just going crazy, it makes this ride even more memorable and super fun. Now, we made our way back to Ohio and realistically the Midwest. We're going to be staying there for a lot of this list, including for what's next, The Legend at Holiday World. Residing in Santa Claus, Indiana, this wooden coaster is pretty absurd in the daytime, and I would argue probably the best ride at the park in the daytime. There's amazing airtime moments and especially some amazing lateral moments where it's pushing it side to side with a triple helix. It's just nuts. Now, add in darkness and everything gets bumped up another notch. It's really incredible. You don't know exactly where you're going, especially when it comes to that helix. You don't know when it's going to end. And man, oh man, I love it so much. It's probably my favorite at the park, at least in my heart. I love it so much. And I would say it's realistically Ghost Rider 2.0, and that makes it even better. However, at number 3, we're going to be talking about Ghost Rider, because this has a more drastic change from day to night, especially if you're riding it at the right time of year. Ghost Rider night rides have become pretty dang legendary. I mean, they literally are becoming a local legend. During a regular nighttime ride, there will be this orange lighting all around the track, so you just can only see that, as well as maybe hang time off in the distance being as bright as can be. But because the structure is constantly flying past you, this ride feels even quicker at night and a lot more intense overall. Everything just feels more extreme. It's really incredible. Now, sometimes, especially during Knott's Scary Farm, they take out those orange lights, or at least turn them off. Add that in with some surrounding fog and some creepy music in the background. It just makes Ghost Rider night rides during Scary Farm some of the best experiences on a coaster out there, as it's running like crazy, as they usually have a maintenance period in September, so you've got fresh timber all over the track, and it makes this thing fly. If there's anything you got to do at Scary Farm, I think it's waiting the 2+ hours potentially at the end of the night for the ride, but it is oh so worth it. It's insane. Now, talking about legendary night rides, we got to head back to Ohio for the Beast at Kings Island. I think this is probably the most legendary night ride out there, and it's because the change is so incredibly drastic. It goes from fairly decent and fun wooden coaster in the daytime to unbelievable at night. Everything feels more intense as you're racing through the woods. My first ride on this coaster was at nighttime, and I kept some sunglasses on because I wasn't sure about bugs, and that only exalted the experience higher. There are parts of the ride where I was like, yeah, what do you mean there's not another helix? Well, guess what? There's only one major helix on the ride, but you'll be thinking there's multiple because every turn is exaggerated. Everything feels quicker, but at the same time takes longer. It does not make any sense. It's incredibly disorienting, and especially intense towards the end of the ride. It is really remarkable, and it's one of those And it's one of those things that I feel like every coaster enthusiast should experience at some point, because even the biggest beast hater I know, mostly coasters, said that at night it was at least decent. But that brings us to number 1, at least in my mind, which is back at Santa Claus, Indiana, their other wooden coaster, not Raven, but the Voyage. When I rode this in the daytime, I was honestly kind of let down overall. I thought the ride was really fun, don't get me wrong, however, almost every element felt lacking. We came back later in the day and the sun was just about set, and by the time we actually got on the ride, it wasn't completely dark, but it was close enough. It was potentially the best ride on any coaster I've ever had. Every hill gave airtime, there was incredible lateral forces, and it just felt unhinged. Add that in with the fact that it is one of the longest coasters in the world and the longest wooden coaster with one lift hill. It really was just remarkable in all ways. The change was so incredibly drastic that I was actually kicking myself, and still am, for only getting one night ride, but it's one that I will remember probably forever. It was just insane. But that does it officially for Listmas Day 2. Let me know what your favorite night ride down in the comments is. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe for more Listmas in the future, as we've got a full 12-day schedule, with the next top 10 being my bucket list trips. So make sure to stay tuned for that. It'll be fun, talking about all the places that I'd like to visit in the future. Well, at least specifically for coasters. And don't forget, we'll have plenty of guests in the future as well, so stay tuned for them, as they'll be announced in the next coming days. But of course, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.